Good morning, everyone. My name is Denise Demese. I'm the Director of Faculty Development for the University System of Georgia. And we are so happy to have you guys here with us today for this seminar about treating cheating as a growth opportunity for your students and for you, with Susan, Hrach, and Mariko Izumi from Columbus State University. And I think probably all of us who taught have that memory of the first time you found someone who cheated. And I was in grad school, and I just remember so distinctly this feeling like at first I was indignant, and then I was hurt, like they'd done it to me personally somehow. And then of course I was terrified because I was a grad student and I had to confront a student about this. So I think the fact that they're the first sentence that they posed in their description is, when students cheat, what emotions do we experience? And that it's funny because when I remember that experience, I remember my emotions behind it more than, what we had to do to resolve it. So we're super happy to have Mariko and Susan here with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them.
Thank you, Denise. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that about the emotional component, and because I think not to acknowledge that is to miss a big part of, our responses to these things. And so we're going to have a chance to discuss that in a moment. But I wanted to, well, first of all, thank you everybody for your time. We know it's getting increasingly busy as the semester goes on, so thank you for choosing to spend this hour with us. And we are hoping that this topic will be especially useful in the current environment, because we know there's a lot of sort of extra anxiety about the new ways that students might be able to take shortcuts, and how we're all sort of anticipating that or responding to it. And so we hope that in the course of the next hour, you'll come away with some strategies and also a sense of your own philosophy and how you want to handle these situations going forward. So in order to kind of get a pre and post snapshot of where we all stand, I'm going to create a scenario for you and share a whiteboard with sort of a spectrum on it, where I'm going to ask you to just put a little mark for where you would fall on the spectrum. And so the scenario is that in one of your courses, you have caught someone either plagiarizing a written assignment or cheating on an exam. And so very straightforward, kind of, the cheating has occurred. And so now, if you see this spectrum, I want you to think about your response to that kind of flagrant violation. Is your response more towards the end of, I'm now just furious, and so you're going to fail this course? Or is your response more towards the, well, I'm not going to freak out about this, you can make up the assignment? So if you cannot see the annotation bar at the top of your screen, what you need to do is go to the View Options drop-down box and choose Annotate. And then you'll see you have some choices for making a stamp or using the drawing tool, and you can just kind of share where you feel you would fall. This is great. Filling up the middle here. Very nice. Ah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, and there's a qualifier. Need to know the why before responding. Well, at this point, I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague Mariko Izumi and let her kind of debrief with you.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I still see people putting their marks on. I'm guessing that this is the kind of response we also grow as your academic career as a faculty too. When I started, I totally started on the left-hand side, right? You flunked my class. This is it. Yeah. So all right. So people, there are good range of people on the whiteboard. So is there anyone who's willing to unmute and share about where you stand? How about with those of you who are on the left-hand side of the column? I'm furious and you failed this course. Anyone who's brave to unmute and share your thoughts?
I will.
Great. Holly. No, Whitney.
Yes. So I kind of, I in the group chat, I kind of put myself, it depends on exactly what and how. If I were like, my class is one where they don't have actual research assignments. The vast majority of any writing that they do is essentially their response to, I teach music, so a piece of music. So if I were to, and I have, discovered that a student just copied a paper from somewhere online, I tend more towards the I'm furious and you fail versus I've also found them copying, say, definitions from Wikipedia or something, where I fall kind of somewhere in the middle. And regardless, I go towards the trying to teach them from this moment. But if they choose to do something flagrant, like just copy a paper or buy a paper and I find it, I definitely go more towards to the furious and you fail.
Yeah, so it really depends on the degree of offenses, if you will. And also, cut and paste for freshmen as opposed to sophomore or graduate student probably would be a different responses.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. All right, anyone who is, how about in the middle?
I'm in the middle. This is Julie.
Hi, Julie.
I've been at this for a long time, so I've shifted. But I teach gen ed class that is functionally a critical thinking class. And so I have a provision in my syllabus, and I let them know that it's serious. They need to know that there's due process. They need to know that in other classes, they may not get a second chance. So I use it as a learning experience, both about better practice, but also about the process on our campus for dealing with instances of academic integrity and how the process works and what they face. And I can do that by following exactly what it says, both in our campus process and in my syllabus. And I've found that dual learning experience puts them in good stead. And I have so many freshmen that I think it's really important that they find out now that this is a big deal in college.
Absolutely. I think the expectations vary, and it's a transition issue, how to college skills as well. Yeah. All right. So how about on the very right-hand side of the spectrum? Anyone? There's a big red or somewhere down there. Anyone willing to unmute and tell us your thoughts behind that mark?
Okay, I'll take a chance on this one.
Great,
So
Doreen.
this is Doreen. I'm the little star right here, double star, because I'm just learning to annotate with these stamps and I love it. I'm probably on this end. I've taught a long time. I agree with why did they cheat, but I also wonder about how effective, when we give a grade for one thing, what are we really being fair to? Are we really assessing the broader scope of learning? Now, I agree, cheating should be something that we discuss, and cheating should be something that has a consequence because real life has consequences, but I'm not sure, we need to teach that to them. I guess that's why I'm kind of there.
Yeah, and focusing on the learning part and why, and I think M. Adams also put it in a chat about ethical, right? How do you get your answer is an ethical issue that also need to be discussed with our students. Has anyone changed? You started off one direction and shifted over the years to one. I definitely shifted from left-hand side all the way to the right? But also, the ethical principle that we need to teach. And I struggle also with institutional policies as well. I wonder whether there are anyone who share that kind of experience. You want to do one thing, but institutional policy kind of prevents you from doing the other.
This is Julie again. I'm at Kennesaw State, and our institutional policy actually lets me work with my preferred policy, which is first instance in my class is 0 on the assignment. Second instance in my class is an F. But our system also lets me report and resolve with the student, which means that if it really is a first instance and a student who doesn't know, I can just go with that, but it's also in the database, so we know whether this is a first instance in every single class this student takes, for instance. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but I think the two mesh together. I think our institutional policy works really well.
It's nice to have that infrastructure that guides your decision making as well. I think cheating is hard because it seems to me that's a very case by case, right?
Right.
Where they are, what our policies are, and also how do we feel about this? And emotion plays a huge part in our decision making as well. And sometimes those emotions are not the same in response to students who did the cheating, right? So our implicit biases also play, unfortunately, in our decision making sometimes. So now then, so what we want to do is to send you off into breakout rooms and discuss 2 items. Why do students cheat? And what do we want them to learn from our responses? Both of which sort of came up in our small conversations we just had. So why do students cheat? What do we want them to learn by our responses?
Okay, so you will have 5 minutes to discuss why students cheat and what we want them to learn from our responses. And you'll be in a breakout room with 3 other people. And you'll get a 60-second warning when it's time to come back and share. So please also maybe designate someone from your room who's willing to report back as well. Here we go.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So we asked you, one of the group members, to be a reporter. So I don't know whether you remember the group you were in. Group number 10. Anyone, any reporter from group number 10? Would you tell us what you discussed? You don't remember the group?
I'll be the first one to confess I have no idea what group I was in.
Okay. Okay. Then
Julie, we were in group 11, just for the record.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
wrote down everything else.
all right. Well then, how about let's go 11 then? Now we know. Sorry.
That's fine. We come from a broad range of disciplines, and that has a lot to do with it. But I think if I pulled one theme out of kind of what we were talking about, it was about making the potential impact of academic dishonesty real to them, from chemistry, where at some point they're going to have to actually learn this stuff and use it in practice. I loved her question, which is, so when do you plan to stop cheating? To info literacy, where she takes it quite understandably, kind of personally, but also explains to them the impact that plagiarism incidences, even as an undergraduate, can have depending on what you want to do later in your life. I really liked also that there was a comment in our group about reinforcing the need to use tilt to help carry this message as well.
I love you for saying tilt. That's my
I didn't say it, I just faithfully recorded it.
Yes, I'm a big proponent of tilt. I think it's fantastic. And I know Rod is kind of smiling there too.
And you already heard all of mine, so.
So for those of you who are not familiar, TILT stands for Transparency in Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. And it's awesome, right? It's one way to create an environment that prevents from students feeling that they need to cheat. All right, so making a potential impact. And I like the question too, when do you plan to stop cheating, right? I think that's a pointed question to have them reflect on their actions. Yeah, well, thank you, Denise, for sharing that link to TILT. And y'all, you need to check it out and practice it. All right, so how about those of you who talked about why students cheat? Anyone who's willing to pop in?
I could offer, this is Frank. I think we were group 12.
Okay, hi, Frank.
Hey, there were 4 points that came up in our group. One was convenience, one was urgency, one was that they didn't consider it cheating, and the larger point was drawn that information taken from the internet sometimes seduces someone into thinking they already know something, so they're not properly attributing the source because they've seen it, read it, now they know it, so it's not plagiarizing. And then the 4th point was just kind of the nature of that person's style. And the reactions went from coming down like a ton of bricks, giving them a chance, and the second chance you're out, to posting documents on helping students understand the violation, the academic violation they made, and signing a pledge not to do it again.
Those are great, especially not knowing the boundary that you read it and you feel like it's your knowledge. I think that's an interesting point because higher ed is filled with those coded rules that are not visible to the students, right? And you don't know it until you break that it was there. And I think that's really important. What we consider as intellectual property, for example, it's something that they don't often realize. And I think we have infrastructure of those assumed codes that guides our behaviors and practices, but because we're not novice anymore, right? Because we swim in the ocean, that we do not know how to describe those assumed and implicit codes that are obvious to us but not to them. So how might we help them gain more literacy in intellectual property and the code of ethics in each discipline and also in general? Yeah. All right. Now then, we have a few cases for you guys to, you all to consider. We will put everyone into small groups again, and every group is going to get a case, and a case for us to think through about responses to cheating. And you will be sent to 3 groups, case 1, case 2, case 3, and I am going to drop the cases into the chat so that everyone has access to them ahead of time. Because once you're in a small group, you cannot access the main one. So I'm gonna drop one here. Case 1 going in. So if you would go ahead and open them, then your group name, when you go to the small group, should tell you which case to look at. Do you see all 3 cases on your computer? I just dropped them all in the chat. And Susan is going to send you all back into small group.
Right, so I'm just gonna give you another few seconds. Make sure you've opened all 3 of those cases because we can't predict in advance which case you will find yourself needing to review. But in this particular breakout session, you will need to pay attention to the name of your breakout room because it will either be 1, 2, or 3. And that's how you'll know which case your small group should discuss. I'm gonna give you 10 minutes. We're gonna have a little bit longer because you'll need time to read the case and then discuss basically how you might align, the prompt is on the case, how you might align your response to what you want the student to learn. And then if there's a way for you to, or for the hypothetical faculty member to have potentially prevented the situation from happening by rethinking what they asked students to do.
Christina, the links are not, I dropped the files. Can you open the PDF files from the chat? Okay.
Right. You just double click on those PDF. All right. So, all right. Well, maybe if someone in your group can't see the case, maybe one person can read it through. All right. So off we go, and we'll be back to us in 10 minutes. All right, and we're back. So at this point, I'm hoping that everyone's breakout room experience was glitch-free, and we'd love to hear what you had to say about each of these cases. So I'm going to mix it up a bit and ask those of you who are looking at case number 2, would someone whose group looked at case number 2 like to share your response to that one? And others, you should be able to view case number 2 from your initial opening of the files, but maybe you'd like to briefly describe what happened there. Anyone from case 2?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. Our group talked about that there was not an intention to cheat in this, and that we're all very sympathetic, right? If you're really sick, you're just like, just make it go away. I don't, you know, you're not. The girl thought that she was being helpful. The boy was sick. So in terms of a response that meets learning outcomes, impressing upon them that what they did was wrong, giving the young man an opportunity to rewrite a new paper, perhaps for not full credit, would be the kind of response we would do. But in terms of preventing it, I know when I teach writing, and so I never have a student the night before papers due sitting down looking at an empty screen. That having scaffolded assignments where you turn in a thesis statement and you know, work on it all along the way prevents this from, first of all, happening. It instills the kind of writing habits we want our students to have anyway. And it also allows me to, you know, if a student is veering off track early on, I can guide them back and be like, reread the assignment. So those are our solutions to number 2.
Thank you, Monica. That's fantastic. I mean, I think the idea of scaffolding is huge because it takes all of the pressure off of this one moment when the thing must be, you know, completed and turned in. That's great. Others who looked at case number 2? Or we can also feel free to share in the chat. Maybe I'll move on and ask those of you who were discussing case number 1. Would anyone like to share your response to case number 1?
So we had case number.
Oh, Amy. Thank you.
Hi. So in this one, there was an essay that students had to write. It was fairly heavily weighted. It was worth 30% of a grade. And what a student did was they just replaced words in the sentence to kind of try to make it their own, but not really realizing that when they did that, it totally changed the sentence. So it didn't make sense. And the example was, time marches on and we cannot stop it. And the student substituted it for time walking on and we cannot stop it. So you can see that that doesn't make sense. And so our thing was the helpful feedback for the student is to let them know that we can detect when you plagiarize because what you're writing really doesn't flow the way it needs to. And then one of the things that we can do, or some of the things that we can do to kind of help the student, is use a rubric and outline on the rubric the consequences of not turning in original work. And then we can also include an aspect of the assignment where the student has to do some reflection so that it's not solely based on information that they had to research, but then what does that mean to you? And with that reflective piece, I mean,
I don't see how you can plagiarize that, but just some thoughts.
I love that idea, Amy, asking them to do a little metacognitive work on reflecting about how they dealt with the assignment is great. And then also, you know, back to something Mariko mentioned earlier about our expert status. I think we need to remember how hard it is, I think, to read that sort of academic discourse and feel like it's possible to put that in your own words. It's really hard to learn that skill of plagiarizing because you feel like I couldn't possibly rephrase this in a way that's going to sound legitimate. And so I think even those who teach writing, you know, spend time in class like sort of helping them practice paraphrasing, or, you know, I mean, citation is a long skill, as a hard, long skill to develop. So
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Others who had case one, feel free to add into the chat also if you had some other strategies, but let me quickly ask for those who dealt with case three. This was a online chemistry course. What happened there? Would anyone like to share what your group discussed? Don't be shy, case three.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, this is Bill Hamilton. Good morning, everyone. Interesting. We had a good discussion with the new world order, I guess, that we're in. We talked a lot about, instead of trying to apply, and group members, correct me if I misstate here, older or previous thinking about cheating, we're gonna have to come up with a new way of looking at this through the lens of the new world. And that may really look at, you know, I'm a proponent of open book. I mean, we can make open book tests that are impossible. And it may actually increase critical thinking. So I think instead of trying to apply old rules to new situations, it's time to apply new rules to new situations. Nothing prescriptive, but just observation right here.
Thank you, Bill. I love that idea. New rules, new situation. I mean, I think the open book thing is, you know, one of those new things to apply to a new situation. Others who were looking at case three, did you think about the open book option or have some other ideas?
I didn't do case three. This is Troy Sullivan, Middle Georgia State. I was in Monica Miller's group. And there's probably a psychologist here, so I'm not a psychologist. I'll go ahead and say that, you know, my wheelhouse is accounting. I'm School of Business. So cross the T, dot the I. It's either one way or the other. There's very little in the middle. However, with all of that said, there is a heavy psychology to go along with the guy, Bill Hamilton's point. I've been in this over 3 decades now. For those of us that's on this call that have been around long enough, I started when I was 22, 53 now. In 3 decades, things have radically changed. I have radically changed. He talks about open book. I use my lab, Pearson. I teach principles primarily, which is a gateway for accounting majors. And there was a time in my career that I would have never had students be able to access their homework, use their homework on an exam, use their book on an exam. It was 25 multiple choice. It was 2 or 3 problems, and that's what it was. And now they use their book, they use their homework, and they struggle even with that. And it disturbs me because I don't necessarily, you know what the answer is in order to link up the way that I am as a teacher now and the way these students are coming to me, you know, from the standpoint that I feel like I need to teach them, what does study mean? You know, and I don't have time for that. You know, I don't have time for this kind of stuff. And so therefore, you know, it becomes, you know, it's a psychological thing to them. And so when we're looking at cheating, we view it a certain way, or an old school person like me, I'll speak for myself. We view it a certain way. But even that has changed, you know, for me. And the way we react to them cheating is a respect mechanism that like triggers with a student. How is Dr. Sullivan going to, you know, interact or react to me cheating? And that is an opportunity to build a rapport that oftentimes didn't exist even before something like that happened. Now, I'm very blunt and I'm very direct with them. And when I deal with a student one-on-one, you know, Jesus may not need to hear some of it. Okay. But I mean, I'm very direct and forthright with them, but they appreciate that. You know, they appreciate a real person being real with them. And that may be more than I need to say, but anyway.
Well, Troy, no, thank you so much. I think one of the things that your comment really helps to clarify is that we've got the learning and we've got the ethics. And there's,
Right.
you know, sometimes that's a very like difficult thing to balance. How do you want to help them learn? How do you want them to learn professional ethics? And so this is the perfect segue.
And all of us want them to succeed. I don't want to fail a student because of what they did or make an example out of them.
Well, I think this is an ideal moment to turn to what some of the research says. And Mariko has done some collecting of resources that she's going to share with you right now. So thank you, everybody, for sharing your responses.
Thank you all. And I think we already hit some of the interesting, you know, research on cheating and what drives students to it. So this is from James Lang. He's, I think, known for small teaching. And he also has a book on learning from academic dishonesty. And he emphasized two important points. One is that much of the research on cheating and academic dishonesty tends to focus strongly on the student side, right? And then how we are going to police them, police around them to modify them. But what Lang calls for out of his research is to also pay attention to the context that drives students into the behavioral choice of cheating, right? We have touched upon that already by addressing that idea of scaffolding to make it a process oriented, right? And also the context in which we're in that, I think, who was it? I think Bill mentioned that earlier, new situation, new case, right? For students, being in English 1101 and moving on to principal accounting, those are two different codes of disciplines, right? So students are moving from one code to the next, and what counts as good writing in one is not the same. What counts as original work is not necessarily immediately visible to them, right? So what are the contextual factors that often push students into the choice of you know, making a choice of cheating, right? So Lang identifies 4 environmental factors that pressure students into cheating. One is an emphasis on performance. So one of the cases you looked at is 30% of the grade rests on one paper. So that heavily drives students to cheating because the stake is so high, which leads to the second one, high stake, writing on the outcome. And unfortunately, for example, in the state of Georgia, Hope Scholarship is tied to the grade. So students often cheat so that they can maintain a good grade, right? And again, and I think someone touched upon that earlier as well, that translating an academic work into your own word and own it and feel confident is a long way for our students to feel really good about their work because export sounds much better, right? Then third one is extrinsic motivation. Again, the grades that rise heavily on many things in academic institution, right? And a low expectation of success when they do not feel confident. So transparent assignment design, we touched on earlier, is one way to kind of mitigate that sense of challenge, right? That this is high stake, but it's something empowering by decoding the discipline, by decoding the assignment in a way that clarifies, why am I doing this? How do I go about in achieving this? And how do I know that I will be successful, right? So those are the 4 criteria as a contextual factors that tends to drive students into cheating very often. But those contextual factors, what's important from Lang's research is that these are controllable by us, right? And that we can find a way, like Monica, I think earlier said, the scaffolding, the assignment is really important. And articulating what we mean by original work, right, to students, going through the examples so they can imagine how the assignment might look like. And so rethink about our assignment itself and exams and why are we doing this assignment, right? I teach freedom of speech class, and I used to give them an exam in which students perceived it as a high stake, and what I wanted them to learn was critical thinking. But exam, when I looked at it, was all about memorizing court cases, right? So why am I doing this? So I changed the ways in which they do the exam, so they don't have to feel compelled to cheat, right, by looking at whatever that's online, right? But instead, I made it into a group effort so they can come together and discuss the answers and choose what answers to provide. And open note, open internet, anything you can find on this planet, but you have to think together to come up with an appropriate response to free speech issues, right? And students enjoyed a little bit more in taking an exam rather than just memorizing, which they don't remember anyways, right? After 5 minutes out of the exam room, they won't remember. And I'm going to share in the chat one resource from UC Berkeley that you might find it useful.
Thank you, Mariko. I think all of us could probably tell a story about the exam or the assignment that was communicating something different to the students than what we had intended. And maybe that's our new way of looking at things, is to say, what is it that I really wanted them to learn? And is that what this particular assessment is actually measuring? Or am I unintentionally communicating that, you know, an exam is your ability to perform under pressure? And I know in my case, if you call something an exam, even if it's worth 5% of their grade, there's something about that word sometimes that even, you know, causes it to feel high stakes. So as we pull our session to a close here, I wanted us to have a chance to reflect on where we are now, potentially, if it's changed since where we started. And so I'm going to share this whiteboard again. Oh no, our original whiteboard, where did it go? All right, I guess I lost it, sorry. But if you think about where you put your mark on that original whiteboard, has this conversation at all changed your position? Do you want to revisit the whiteboard? I can recreate it really fast. Here we go.
You can even just throw it up there and we remember where the arrow was, I bet.
That's right. Here's the arrow. Whoops. There we go. So if you're able to, again, if you can't see the annotation bar, you get to that by going to the, there we go, view options and choosing annotate as a drop down. I'm just really curious to know, and I'd like for everybody to feel free as an exit ticket to kind of share in the chat as well. What's one takeaway for you from this conversation, given the complexities of the issue and our emotions that are involved? What's something that you've learned or that you're taking away as kind of a new strategy for moving forward, or insight that you've gained from hearing from others? Would anyone like to share a takeaway or contribute in the chat? Great.
This is Whitney again. One of the things that hadn't really occurred to me to the extent as it has after this discussion, is exactly how
Oh, Whitney, I think we lost you.
I wonder whether she dropped off from the connection.
I don't know.
One thing, I heard recently from a faculty was that that fatigue of being accommodating, given the context we're in with the pandemic, right? That's a series of accommodating and not, deadline doesn't matter anymore because they can't turn anything in on time anyways. And so by the time the plagiarism happens, so the bandwidth is kind of gone, and like, I don't care, right? I just don't want to deal with it. And so I think that's also added a dimension of emotion and decision fatigue that relates to plagiarism.
That's really interesting. Decision fatigue. So Monica has said in the chat, just the message that the assignment is to the students. Yes, that's a good takeaway. Other takeaways? McKinley says cheating needs to be understood so it can be prevented. That's right.
I think with my generation, we handle stress better than this generation, the younger 18 to 20. They don't know how to manage that. And so they use a lot of things that cause them to end up cheating because whether it be social media, whether it be health issues, it can be a host of different things. They really don't know how to approach all of that. And I think maybe my generation did it a little bit differently than that. But to them, they really have issues there. And I find that most of my accommodation is, I'm having to manage them or get them to understand or see a different way of doing something. It becomes a means to an end for them. That's really what it is. It's not that I'm a cheater, I enjoy doing this, I want to disrespect you. I mean, I would say 100% of the kids that I've caught cheating were not in that category at all.
Isn't that interesting too? I think that there's something really hard to resist about taking it personally, because when a student cheats in your class, it's instantly like, who do they think I am?
Yeah.
Why would they do this to me?
Yeah.
As if I wouldn't be able to tell. And that's really hard. But for us to be cognizant of our own, self-aware about our own responses to the context and the fact that it's really not about us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and their cheating has helped me, this may be crazy to say, their cheating has helped me to grow professionally and develop, I think, into a better teacher, which is
That's
strange.
amazing. That's fantastic. I mean, I think you're right. We're in this for the long haul, and if we're learning and growing, then that's making the best out of a bad situation, to be sure. Mariko, did you have any closing comments?
There are lots of comments going on, and I think Monica mentioned that my response is to feel insulted, and I think that's honest, right? And because we do believe, we tend to feel responsible for the ethical teachings, right? Integrity of what we teach as well as the discipline. And McKinley said, what keeps me up is all students who cheated and didn't get caught.
That's true.
Right? We just have to trust our colleagues in the system eventually to catch up with them. And so I sit on student conduct panel at my institution, and they do get caught somewhere, one way or the other.
All right. Well, I'm watching the time. I think we're at 12:01, so I don't want to keep anybody past our allotted hour. But this has been a wonderful opportunity to learn from you. So thank you, everybody, for your generous sharing and reflective insights. And thanks, Denise, for offering us the chance to have this workshop.
Well, thanks so much, Mariko and Susan, for leading us through this discussion. We really appreciate all of you joining us. Thanks, y'all. Oh, and just so you know, I'm going to put in the chat, we have some new workshops that have just been scheduled that talk about hybrid and getting back to the classroom. So I'm going to pop that in the chat, but you will all get an email from me about this too later today. All right, thanks everyone.
All right, thank you.
Bye.